We spend a ton of time talking about the right fly to use during winter, and for good reason. Fly selection matters a lot, especially when there's not a lot of bugs hatching. But just as important as what fly you pick is how you present that fly. The key to catching fish, after all, is to put a fly in front of them and make it look real. Great presentation can often make up for less than ideal fly choice. So today on Untangled, we're going to look at 2 separate winter fly fishing rigs that we just used on a recent trip. We'll share what our rigs looked like, why we chose them, and most importantly, the principles behind these rigs so you can apply these lessons the next time you're out on the water. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Co. Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled, and I am your host, Spencer Durant, alongside my intrepid apprentice, Alex Stoltz.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
You're a little sick today, though.
A little bit, a little under the weather, but can't stop me.
I just love that you would show up while you're sick and then get me sick, too. Nothing says that we're great friends quite like that.
That's what friends are for.
You're not wrong. No, happy to be here. We're back in the bougie studio this week, which I got a little bone to pick with you about that. Because you know how much I dislike being in Utah. But then you build me this fancy studio that matches my personality and my talent finally for the first time. And now I have to be here all the time.
We had to get you somehow.
I know. I still don't have a chateau for those wondering. But anyways, we got way more interesting stuff to talk about this week. We're going to chat about a little trip Alex and I went on, what?
3 weeks ago?
Yeah, not that long ago. And specifically, we'll talk about the rigs we used, the different things that we saw on the water. But there was a lot that we took. It was just one day, but there was a lot that we took from the trip that hopefully y'all will get something out of.
Yeah,
so,
there were a lot of principles that we learned and a lot of principles that were like emphasized that
yes,
we talk about all the time.
So it was definitely worth bringing back. So it was a few weeks ago, like we said, and we went out. The goal was to go chuck streamers for most of the day. That is what we wanted to do because I love streamer fishing in the winter. It's a lot of fun. You can have really good days chucking streamers in the middle of winter.
And for those that are new to the channel, Spencer has talked about streamer fishing out of a boat a ton.
Yes.
And he's told me about it, how epic it is, how much fun it is. And personally, I haven't had too much experience chucking streamers other than just smaller rivers. I've been doing it quite a bit more this fall and winter. And so Spencer texted me, he's like, dude, it's going to be 40 degrees and cloudy.
Yes.
Prime time for streamers.
And the cloudy matters because trout love to move on streamers when it's overcast because they want to feel safer. If it's a bright sunny day where you can see everything for miles, they don't feel safe. Okay? They're like chicken wings when you hear that I'm in town, or Coke Zero at the Maverick Fountain when you hear Alex is driving through. Okay? It's going to be gone. Trout feel the same way on a bright sunny day because the birds that can come get them, any other predators, they're just a lot more exposed when it's bright and sunny. You get that nice overcast day, and if it stays overcast all day, it can just be stupid fast, especially from a boat on the right kind of river. And we'll get into that in a bit. But from a boat, right kind of river, you chuck those streamers out. And I mean, this day was like a 40 fish day, maybe.
Dude,
40,
spoiler
50.
alert.
It was great.
Yeah, that's why we're talking about it. It was such a
we're
great
going to come and tell you a story about this time that just sucked. And just, we usually try and make you uplifting here at VFC. Want you to feel like you can go out and do it. But today's story is really just fishing sucks. You're going to suck at it and don't bother. No, it's obviously not the goal. So we go out with streamer fishing in mind. That's what we wanted to do. And we show up to the river to go fish with our buddy Ryan, Green River Fly Fisher on Instagram. And Ryan's always ready to fish, like the drop of a hat. It's kind of ridiculous.
He has a rod in his boat. His boat's already hooked up.
Yeah.
He's ready to go.
So did we even bring a rod?
Yeah.
Okay, we brought one.
We brought a couple of our prototype rods.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
We did. So we brought a couple of those, but then Ryan just hands me, we put the boat in the water. He just hands me this rod with a dry dropper rig set up, which I thought was kind of interesting. It was a chubby with some sort of jigged nymph underneath it. I'm not allowed to say what it was. I will get not just canceled, I will get thrown out of our fly fishing fraternity if I spill the beans on that one.
Yeah, Ryan has some secret flies that he will not let us almost even talk about. Like, we might have to keep our voices down.
We
could
might
hear us.
Yeah, he's probably in town too, to be honest. No, I went to this dry dropper rig in the upper stretch because the first mile or so of river is just so cold. The water is so cold because the river's a tailwater. So that means the water's coming out of a dam from a reservoir, and January, water's cold. So the fishes really aren't moving a whole lot. You got to get downriver a bit, let the water warm up just a bit, and then the fish will start getting active.
And Ryan also mentioned that first mile of the river, there's a lot of really deep pools, and they get fished hard this time of year, particularly, and with streamers especially.
Yep.
And so that was another reason fast forward a little bit. So Spencer had the dry dropper rig on.
Yep.
I had the streamer rig on, and I was chucking streamers that whole first mile, and I had no love, like absolutely zero love.
Meanwhile, in the front of the boat, or the back of the boat, I think. I was in the back
you were
the
in
whole
front.
day. No, it wasn't?
You were in the front the entire day.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a different trip I'm thinking of. Yeah, you're right. I was in the front of the boat the whole
because
day.
I'm a gentleman and a scholar.
So I'm in the front of the boat, chucking this dry dropper rig, and I stick, what do we say that was, a 21, 22-inch brown?
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Yeah.
First fish of the day is this massive brown trout.
It was a stud, and it was absolutely beautiful. We'll actually throw some, we got some pretty cool shots of it we released it. I'll throw it up on screen for those that are watching the video podcast.
And I caught quite a few more fish, quite a few browns on that dry dropper rig. A few of the little rainbows that the river's known for, right? But yeah, Alex not having any luck. Well, we get about mile and a half downriver, and it's like a switch flipped. Streamer fishing just turns on.
And it was like right at that mile mark too that Ryan was talking about. It was crazy.
He points out this rock and he said, oh yeah, the other day right here is where it turned on. And then he went strip, boom, and hooked into a fish. It's like, okay, I see what you're doing there, Ryan. So Ryan hooks up, or I hooked up, and Alex wasn't hooking up, but I was catching some fish pretty consistently on the streamer. And then I swapped with Ryan and I rode for a minute, and he starts catching fish, and he is just nailing them. And I was nailing them pretty well too. And then Alex is in the back of the boat. And how many fish did you catch?
I caught a couple, but it was really slow for me. And so I had a 6-weight with a certain fly line on it, and then a streamer. And then Spencer and Ryan were switching back and forth between
with the one rod,
Ryan's 7-weight with a certain fly line. And then at one point we had the same streamer on both rods, and consistently that 6-weight was underperforming the 7-weight.
And it's not because it was a 6-weight. It's because of the fly line itself, which we'll get into in a minute. But once we figured out the kind of retrieve the fish wanted, where exactly they were hanging out, it was amazing fishing all day. The fish were hitting the fly hard. They wanted them nice and deep. They wanted them moving pretty slow.
And the water was crystal clear. So you could see the streamer as soon as it started sinking. And we were using like a light colored whitish streamer. So you could see it in the water as you're pulling it through. And then the fish would just come over and hammer it. It was almost like dry fly fishing, but it was that exciting. It was a blast.
And that's why I love it so much out of the boat, because when you're waiting, you don't get to see that. When you're in the boat, you're elevated up above the water, and then you get to cover so much water. And with streamer fishing, covering water is the name of the game. You really have to cover a ton, and it's so much more effective to do that out of the boat. Just piggybacking a little bit off of our last podcast together, where I was right, by the way. But anyways,
we'll let the people decide.
No, the people are
I'm pretty
wrong.
sure the comments were going my way.
No, the people are wrong, Alex. It's okay.
Our last podcast was all about if drifting or wading was better.
So fishing goes really well. we even started catching fish in a little bit quicker water too. Once the day really warmed up, it topped out not quite at 40, but mid 30s. So it was relatively warm for that.
Yeah, I would say my most memorable fish of the day was I threw the streamer into this tight little pocket where there was a softer seam coming off the side of this big rock. And I just nailed my spot. And as soon as that fly hit the water, a fish just boom, smacked the streamer. That was my most exciting fish.
It was almost like a dry fly eat because he hit it as the streamer was dropping in the water column. Yeah. It was really cool.
And it was like the faster water, which I wasn't expecting. It was really fun.
And yeah, we ended the day with probably 40 fish in the boat between the three of us, I think. 3 doubles.
Yeah,
so
double ups.
Yeah, doubled up 3 separate times where the 2 guys fishing both had a fish on at the same time, which is really cool. And then we only saw one other boat the whole day, but we passed them and then we didn't see anybody the whole day, which was amazing. It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, and the scenery was absolutely stunning. It was a relatively warm day. It was like 40 degrees.
I was bundled up, so I was happy.
And then good company, other than Spencer.
Right? So we had a great time. But the stuff that we want to hone in on a little bit is winter streamer fishing just in general, right? But then the other thing is, we'll mention this a little bit too, but Alex, with that 6-weight, he was having a hard time catching fish. And eventually Ryan wanted to test out the 6-weight because it's the prototype for a 6-weight that we may or may not be releasing at some point in 2026. Thank you. I almost said 25. Couldn't remember what year it was. At some point in the next 12 months, we'll be dropping this thing, hopefully. But anyways, Ryan wanted to play with it. So as soon as Alex got the 7-weight with that line that was on it, Alex just starts killing it. Just starts hammering them.
And again, it was the same exact fly on both rods. Yep. I've never had such a stark difference in gear, like where it just, the switch flipped and it was like fish, and go back to the 6-weight and not that many.
It was kind of depressing for me because I was just nailing fish and Alex wasn't. And then we swapped rods and I thought I was a good angler and it just turned out I had the right setup. So sometimes that's really all it takes. It's just having the right stuff on your rod. And then, of course, knowing what the right stuff is and why it's working and, all the why that we talk about here on the show. That's, I guess it's important. So that stuff matters. But let's, if you're good with it, why don't we just dig into the fly line part of it right now? Because that really, I think that stands out when we were talking about this trip and thinking, okay, was there enough here for a show? Was there enough to talk about on the podcast? We both kept coming back to the fly line lesson. And I think it is. And again, just to reiterate, 7-weight, 6-weight, same fly on both rods. Eventually, the first part of the day, we fished different ones. But once me and Ryan just started nailing fish on the 7, Alex switched over. We had the same flies on both. The only thing that's different is the fly lines that were used, not just the weight of them, but the actual design of the line. And for that,
they were different branded fly lines. They had different designs. And for those who aren't super familiar with fly lines, we do need to define a couple of terms just so that we're all on the same page. So when we're talking fly line anatomy, you have the tip of the fly line, which is called the head of the fly line. And depending on what that fly line is designed for, the head will be different. So it can be thicker, it can be thinner, it can be thicker towards the front and thinner towards the back of the head.
Can also be shorter or longer. The head can make up 20 feet on one fly line, and then it can make up 60 feet on another fly line. It depends on what that line is designed to do, on what the head length is going to be. And that is where the fly lines get their weight rating, is from the head weight itself. The first 30 feet of the head is what gives a fly line and determines if it's a 5-weight, a 4-weight, a 6-weight, whatever it is.
And the head, let's say you wanted a heavier head on your fly line, that's going to help you turn over bigger, heavier flies. So when we're talking streamer fly lines, usually they're thicker in the front, they're really heavy so that they can turn over those bigger, heavier flies. And then another term is density. There are fly lines that are floating fly lines. I would say that's the standard fly line that you use most of the time.
Yep.
There's sink tip fly lines, which part of it is floating. And then at a certain point in the fly line, it starts to sink. And then there's full sink fly lines, which the entire fly line sinks below the surface.
And if any of you guys out there, I'm not being facetious when I say this, if any of y'all out there actually use full sink lines on a consistent basis, please let me know. Drop a comment. If you're listening on Spotify, there's the ability to comment. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you can. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I guess you're out of luck a little bit. You can also run over to School. It's our group that we run. It's like Facebook, but it doesn't suck. It's just a place to hang out, talk shop. There's a link to join School down in the show notes as well. But let us know. I'm really curious how many people use full sink fly lines, because I have yet to really, other than lake fishing, I have yet to find a really good use case for them. And I'm sorry to distract a little bit, but that's something that's been on my mind a lot. And I wanted to put that CTA out there. Again, not being facetious. I just want to know who actually uses a full sink line.
Yeah. And so the full sink line, those are mostly used in lake fishing because you have to get really deep sometimes to catch those lake fish. But mostly when you're fishing streamers in a river, like we were on this trip, you're using a sink tip fly line. And then after you get past the head, that is your running line. So that is the majority of the fly line. That is what goes through your guides most of the time. And that's just what you're working with when you're casting and when you're trying to get it out there. So you go running line is most of your line to your head, which is what we just talked about.
And it can also help to think of running line almost like backing, because that's basically what it functions. You're casting that thick, heavy weighted portion, and the running line is just there to help you retrieve it, essentially.
Yeah. And so we had two different fly lines. And fly line one, hold on, I'm trying to get this pulled up.
Alex has even got fancy graphics that he made for us, which is awesome. I've got them pulled up over here. I can run through them for a minute if you need me to.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So the first fly line, and we'll throw this, we've got a graphic up here on the screen for those watching the video podcast. But the first fly line has a short, pretty fast sinking tip. I think those lines are a 15-foot sink tip. So the first 15 foot of the line is designed to sink, and I think it's a 5-inch per second line. These lines will be rated on how quickly they sink: 1 inch per second, 3 inch per second, 5 inches per second. I think this is a 5-inch line that we were using. But then the rest of it after that 15 feet, it just goes straight from sinking line to floating line. So that's what that line is designed to do. You want to get the flies down quickly. That's what this line is designed to do, but then easily pick it up and recast, because when you have a lot of sinking line out there, or even intermediate line, which we'll get into in a minute, when you go to recast all of that, it'd be really hard to pull that all through the water. There's a lot of tension on it. So sometimes you'll have to almost roll cast first, and then you can pick it up and make your cast, because you got to get all the line up on top of the water, break that tension, and then you can actually make the cast. These short, fast sink tip lines really aid you in casting quickly to hit pockets when you're floating down a river from a drift boat.
And funny enough, I've used this fly line when I've been fishing smaller streams with streamers this fall, and I've absolutely killed it.
Yeah, you had a day earlier on one of our little super secret streams.
Yeah,
you just.
Alex probably caught
me.
like 30 fish in one day on streamers, which doesn't happen for me.
And he calls me. He says, "You'll be so proud of me." And I said, "Did you finally catch a fish on a dry fly?" And he said, "No, I fished streamers all day." And I was just as proud.
It's so true. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to see that trip for you.
But what was so great about this fly line on the small stream is I was making very, very short casts, like maybe 10, 15 feet. I was quartering downstream, and then I'd strip it back really fast. And so it was great for that purpose. But as soon as we got on this bigger river in a boat, and I'm chucking 30, 40 feet of line.
We were doing, our average cast was closer to about 60 feet.
I'm never good at estimating that.
I know. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's super common to fish streamers on that long of a cast on a river. I think this is one of the few rivers where you really well, maybe it is. I might take that back. I don't think it's not uncommon. It's not super common. It's just, yeah, that's what this river was. It was longer on average cast, probably about 50 to 60 feet.
Yeah. And so as soon as I take this fly line to that river, a lot of the running line, it floats, and then just the tip was sinking. And so again, in this graphic, there's almost like a hinge in the line where it's floating and then it abruptly goes to sinking, and then the fly is down there. And so when we were stripping in this line, it was almost like the fly was at an angle towards the surface versus staying horizontal in the strike zone.
And if you guys have any history with conventional fishing, throwing jigs, the presentation with this first fly line is very similar to a jig, which in a lot of ways is what you want with your streamer. Streamers, jigs are very similar. They're mimicking a lot of that same action, making the same movements in the water. However, and this gets into the rig side of things, we'll get into this in a minute as well, but that's not necessarily what you want in the middle of winter, because we realized very early on that the fish wanted the flies low, they wanted them deep, close to the bottom, and they wanted them moving pretty slow. So that jiggy action where they move up through the water very abruptly, very quickly, and then they move up quite a bit and drop down quite a bit, usually that is going to serve you well, especially on a shallower river. But on this river that we were fishing, some of those holes are 20, 30 feet deep. They're very deep holes.
Yeah.
Some of that is not the action of the presentation that you want. You want it down as close to the bottom as possible, just kind of barely bouncing, not those big jerky jig motions that you can get with this kind of line that we were using.
Yeah. And so if we contrast that with the second fly line, that one had a much longer sinking head. Do you remember how long that one was?
I don't, but let me pull it up on the interwebs real quick.
So while he does that, so the first fly line, the sinking head was quite short. We called it like 15 feet earlier.
Yeah.
This one was much longer. While Spencer pulls that up. And so this was designed
51 foot head.
Oh my gosh.
So almost the entirety of the line we were casting was the head of the line itself.
That's fascinating.
So what is that? Almost 3
5X?
times his length?
Yeah.
Three
4X,
times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
4X.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this second fly
head.
line, it's designed specifically for streamer fishing so that there's the term is horizontal tracking.
Yep.
So instead of that hinge like we had in the first fly line, that entire head was sinking. It was getting closer to the bottom so that when you're stripping, it was parallel to the bottom versus like an upward angle.
The other part of that head that is important to think about as well is and let me just pull the diagram up again to make sure. Yeah. So the way that this line is put together, the very front of it, the first 6 or 7 feet, is very fast sinking line, but then the rest of it transitions from sink to intermediate line. And that's line that's not made to sink. It's not made to float. It's made to just kind of hold, right in the middle of water column. But when you attach that to sinking line, you get all the benefits of it's easier to handle. It's easier to maneuver than full sink line because it doesn't all sink. It kind of keeps things suspended a little bit. But then you don't get that sharp angle, that hinge, or that really jiggy motion with it. You get that nice even pull across the bottom.
Yeah, so that was the biggest difference in the fly lines was having this upward jiggy motion versus the horizontal parallel to the river bottom. We could strip it nice and slow, but it would stay on the same horizontal angle the entire time we were stripping it.
Yep. And
we are assuming that is the reason the fish wanted that fly over the first one.
Oh, it's 100%. Yeah, because it was down where they wanted it. It was low and slow, which is the name of the game for winter streamer fishing.
It was such a stark difference that that was the difference. It was 100%. It was so obvious that this is why that rig was working.
Yeah, because I would say you and I are probably pretty stinking equal fishing skill wise.
Yeah.
So to have there be such a stark difference between the rods, that's when you know it's the setup and not just the guy.
Totally.
Unless one of us is on a heater that day.
I mean, then we got Ryan who just outfishes us 10-1.
Yeah,
so that guy puts a rod in his hand and it's like fish.
It's embarrassing sometimes. But that was the big thing about the rigs. The other part we got to talk about too is why we picked streamers in the first place. It's middle of winter. We spent a lot of time talking about picking small flies and, working through your midges, your eggs, your attractors, your scuds, your sow bugs, your worms, really focusing on that diet this time of year. Why do we throw all that out the window and go chuck streamers?
And we didn't chuck one bobber the whole day.
No, we didn't. I was so proud of you.
I know. It took some willpower, but we did it.
So why though? Why do we go streamer fishing and look for that in the middle of winter?
Well, number one is I feel like it's a weak point in my fly fishing repertoire. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I've tried to do this fall and winter is just put myself out of the comfort zone and get better at streamers. But so that was me personally. But as far as like the conditions and why you texted me and you were like, dude, streamer city. Let's go. So it was overcast.
Yep.
We talked about that already. So fish do want those smaller bugs because they are prominent this time of year.
Yep.
But we do talk about how fish want to do the least amount of work for the most amount of food possible.
Yep.
A big streamer, that's a lot of calories. That's a lot of food. And so the fish, even though it's winter, even though they're sluggish and slow, if they see that big meal, they are willing to hit it.
And a lot of times we're kind of in that dead zone between end of winter, beginning of spring. So at this point, the bug activity is at its absolute lowest. There's probably not another time of the year when you have as few bugs moving as you do right now. Think about it. So, and this is something that Ryan's told me a whole bunch. When the fish run out of bugs to eat, what are they going to do? They're going to start eating each other, right? And that's what you see. That's why there's this window. I wouldn't say all winter long is great streamer fishing because it's not. The early winter, when maybe you still have some brown trout spawning or whatnot, you've got a lot of aggressive fish still. Yeah. But post spawn, first part of January can be kind of meh in a lot of places. But when you get these rivers that have a reputation for being a good streamer fishery, and you get to this point where the bug activity is really low, the fish still want to eat, you get some of those overcast days, it starts to warm up a little bit. Yeah, stripping those streamers around, it's going to trigger that very predatory instinct in the fish. And just like Alex said, it's a bigger meal. So they're going to go for that versus, well, I just want to eat midges one by one today and just, it's like eating one piece. Nobody eats one piece of popcorn. And if you do meet someone who eats one piece of popcorn, don't trust that person, okay? They cannot be trusted. You eat it by the fistful like a man, get butter dripping down your beard, salt all over. You find out all the canker sores in your mouth because the salt hits it, right?
You get to the movie theater early so that you can eat the entire tub of large popcorn. You can get the free refill before the movie starts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't drink anything because nobody wants to go pee in the middle of the movie, right? But that's how the fish are too. They're gonna love to go after those streamers. So I wouldn't say that every fishery is a great streamer fishery in the middle of winter. There's certainly exceptions to that. Tailwaters definitely consistently produce the best streamer fishing because the water temperatures are a little bit more stable. There's usually a lot of that food base in there. But again, once we get to this time of year where there's really not a lot of bug activity, then those fish are going to go ahead and start moving on streamers.
And then another question we have written down here is, did it matter that we were floating or waiting? And just going back to the last podcast we did together.
Of course it mattered.
I'm going to take your side on this one. I do think that floating was more effective because, again, this time of year, you're going to find fish that are feeding and you're going to find fish that are just sluggish, that don't want to do anything.
Because as fast and as good as the fishing was, we would get a whole bunch of fish out of one spot. We'd float down to the next run, nothing. And it was like that all day. There's very little time where it was consistently out of 3-4 runs back to back to back to back.
And there's thousands of fish per mile in this river. And so we were just finding those ones that were willing to hit the streamer.
Yep.
If you're waiting, you're not able to cover as much water and get your flies in front of those fish.
Yep.
So
awesome.
And then I think we should touch on the dry dropper during winter because that is a slept on tactic.
So this is the other part of the rig that we talked about. So the dry dropper, I fished yesterday on my way down here. I almost tied one on yesterday. Kind of wish that I did because some fish started rising, but I tied on a 3 nymph rig with my nymphs on tags.
And a bobber.
And
split shot?
No split shot, but I'd have a bobber.
Then I would have been really worried about you.
I know, right? So the big thing with why this worked so well is by using a dry dropper, you can feel and see the tiniest of the bites, especially in the water we were fishing it in. We were focusing on fishing this in the water that's almost not moving. Water it's very still. The pools where a lot of fish pot up this time of year.
Eddies.
Yep.
Ugh.
Eddies. You throw this dry dropper on and you get that nymph to sit right above the bottom. Not on it. You don't want it dragging on the bottom. You want it right above the bottom. If you can get that set up, you can get that dialed as you move around the river and fish these different pools, then you can just let it sit there. And the fish, as they either cruise around the pool or as the current brings it to them, they can just, they barely have to move. They just open their mouth, suck it in, and then you're going to see that super tiny, subtle movement on that dry fly way better than if you're using an indicator. The indicators don't move as much. They don't have as much sensitivity as a dry fly does.
Yeah, and during the summer, if you're fishing a dry dropper, that dry fly will just dart under the surface. Like you have a fish.
Yep.
It's crazy this time of year when you're using it, and you just see like
tiny twitches.
Tiniest of little twitches. Yep. Set the hook. Fish has the fly in its mouth.
I think that's how that big brown that I caught was, right? Because the fly barely moved. But it was just that little twitch. It just I don't even know if it hesitated or it twitched. It just hesitated. And that little hesitation, you just, boom, set the hook. And so that's another strategy, another principle to keep in mind is the fish are going to be eating softly. You want to increase the sensitivity of your rig, which is why we talk about not using split shot as much as possible. And then using the smallest indicator you can get away with, or just switching to a dry dropper altogether. It's very unlikely that they're going to eat your dry fly. I think we did have one go after though, didn't we?
Yeah, we had 2 come up and eat the chubby in the middle of
a size 10 chubby
right
in
at the end of January.
Yeah. Which you'll get fish that do that, right? And you don't want to catch those are the dumb fish. Those fish grew up eating paint chips. They lived under power lines. You don't want to associate with those fish. You want to catch fish that are going to eat that nymph.
And along the same lines, that dry fly is going to land on the water a lot softer than one of those big indicators. That's what I found. Regardless of if you're fishing a big tailwater or a small stream, especially on a small stream, if you're fishing those slow, deep pools, if you land that indicator on top, it can spook fish so fast and there's no chance you're catching them after that.
Yeah.
So those little tiny dry flies, if you can land them softer and the fish don't spook. That's a tactic I've used in the winter in low clear water. That's been very effective.
And definitely feel free to tweak the setup too. You don't have to use a big chubby and a big nymph. We were doing that because we were fishing bigger water, deeper holes. We needed a bigger nymph. You'll fish the stuff that matches the river that you're on, the fishery that you're dealing with. Adjust that as much as you need to. But I think I'm just going back over my notes. I think that covers the
one
trip.
more. There's one more.
Oh, what is there?
I actually really appreciated this because when Spencer showed up to our trip,
this one, yeah,
he was stoked.
Of course it was.
The energy he had was contagious, and I very much appreciated because it was a cold, wintry day. I've been driving in the truck for a while, and I showed up, and he was like, "Let's go! Time to fish!" And so that was one thing that we learned on this trip was how contagious and how it even got Ryan a little excited, which is tough.
Yeah, Ryan doesn't get excited about fishing. He kind of hates fishing, to be completely honest. He doesn't get stoked on it anymore. And even he was a little stoked. So, no, I forgot about that one. Thank you. So,
yeah. So if you get out there, and you're fishing with some buddies, like just
Be
get
stoked.
Yeah.
Be psyched. Be so ready to fish that it doesn't matter what happens. You're just going to go catch them.
And that's something I'm going to try and do this year. When we show up for trips, sometimes the travel can get you, or just show up and kind of just. It's funny to talk about mindset when we're fly fishing, but it does make a difference. Sometimes.
It definitely does. And you get to practice on Thursday.
I do.
2 days from now, because we got a little trip on the books.
I know. I'm excited.
Yeah, we got to go get some stuff done.
I'm stoked.
Are you psyched? Are you ready?
Psyched out of my mind.
Awesome. Well, if you all have any more questions about winter fishing, streamer fishing in general, drop comments, let us know, reach out to us on school. We'd love to clear some of that up for you. But hopefully seeing how and why we approached the river the way we did could answer some of those questions, give you some ideas to use out on your home water as you get out for the rest of this winter. But it is time to jump into the Q&A portion of this week's show. It's just like we do every week here at Untangled. We're going to spend half the show directly answering questions from listeners and viewers just like yourself. So if you've got a fly fishing question that you would like answered, please send those on into us. There's a link to do that down in the show notes or right here somewhere on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. Now, that is what we do normally. But when Alex and I sit down together and do the show, we try to pull more questions from school, which we mentioned earlier. The questions that y'all send in, these are absolute must-haves. Those shape the show every single week. But we like to, when Alex and I get to do the show together, we like to give the school community just another shout out, just say thanks to everybody that's in there. And part of that is we'll go in and we'll post like, hey, we're doing a show. What questions do you have? And we'll get very specific, very time-sensitive questions from folks in school. We answer those on our show together. And that's where today's questions come from, is the folks who dropped their questions in response to my post in school.
And I'll read the first one. This one is from Luke. He says, I have a few questions for you. Everyone says that a 9-foot 5-weight is the ultimate jack of all trades, do everything rod. But I'm wondering if a 2-rod setup is better, a 4-weight dedicated to dries and a 6-weight for nymphing. Does a 6-weight nymph better than a 5-weight, or does the 5 do that job just as well and make the jump unnecessary? Basically, is the 5-weight the best because it's the most versatile, or because it nymphs the best, or does dries the best? Also, no one really talks about 7-weights. Where do they actually shine? What were they designed for? Are they overkill for throwing streamers on tailwaters, or is that exactly where they come into their own? Thanks.
That's a lot, Luke, but I appreciate it. Not a lot in a bad way. I'm just like, ooh, we got to wade through here for you. 9-foot 5-weight. It is the ultimate jack of all trades. 2-rod setup. You're asking a guy who has north of 40 fly rods if you need more than one. Duh. Yeah, you need more than one, buddy. But as far as taking them out with you to the river and whatnot, that is always ended up more of a pain. And it's one more thing to forget and leave by the river, honestly. So I don't go to the river with more than 2 rod or more than 1 rod. The only time we'll have multiple rods rigged up and ready to go is when we're in the boat, we're floating. Because then we can have a nymph rod set up, we can have a dry rod set up, we can have a dry dropper or a streamer set up, depending on what time of year we're fishing. So it's nice to have all of those ready to go out of the boat. But when I'm waiting, I'm fishing one certain way, I'm fishing one certain style. That's what I'm going to focus on that day. And I'll bring the rod that's going to let me do that. With that in mind, the 5-weight, yes, it is your jack of all trades. Use that for 99% of what you're going to do, especially when you start out. Once you understand what you want to specialize in, what you want to do, if you want to nymph a lot, then you can go into the 10 or 11 foot 3 and 4-weight rods. Get yourself a specialized nymphing tool. If you really want to do dry flies, you can go get your 8 or 8.5 foot 4-weights. Really dial into that. But then if you go out and you think, oh, I don't know what today's going to bring, I just want something that's going to be versatile, that's where your 9-foot 5-weight shines. So that's why we recommend that so heavily. Now, does the 6-weight nymph better than the 5-weight? Depends on what you mean by better. Okay. The rod's not going to do anything. The rod's not going to make anything better. It's all you and how you know how to handle it. If I give you a 6-weight, you don't know how to cast, you don't know how to mend, you don't know how to do anything, you're not going to have an easier time with that 6-weight than you are with the 5-weight. Okay. Remember what the whole point of upgrading line weights is and moving to different line weights. The heavier line weight, the bigger flies you can cast. That's what it boils down to. It's not about, well, does it do it better? It's what is it designed to do? Your bigger rods are designed to cast bigger flies. Yes, usually that means bigger fish. Not always, but usually it can mean bigger fish. So a 6-weight is going to be more effective, is going to throw a larger nymph more effectively with less effort, and you're going to have more control over it, especially during the cast, than if you throw that same very large nymph on a 5-weight. And conversely, on a 4-weight, generally you don't want to nymph too much of those. It's just a little too light to do a lot of indicator 2-nymph split shot style nymphing. Dry dropper action on a 4-weight can be great. But so getting back to it, the 6-weight, it's not going to be a better nymphing rod than the 5. A lot of that goes into the rod's design too. Some 6-weights are great dry fly rods. Some are great nymphing rods. Depends on what the rod was built for. Generally speaking, though, the only time you're going to say, well, I'm nymphing with this rod today is what are you throwing a big, like a crawdad pattern with a big scud underneath it? Or are you throwing small midge nymphs all day long? That's really going to dictate why you decide to go with the 5 versus the 6-weight. If I'm throwing smaller nymphs, I'm going to go with my 5. A lot of the times, especially the last year or so, I have been nymphing a lot more with my 6-weight, but that's also because I've been throwing larger nymphs. So that's why I opt for the 6-weight.
Yeah, it really has to do with the size of your flies.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to is, are you chucking a big, heavy nymph rig?
Yep.
I think the 6-weight will be more effective.
It's definitely going to shine.
Like better, I think it would be a better option if you're chucking those heavier nymph rigs versus, like you just said, if you're in Colorado and you're chucking a Dorsey yarn indicator with size 26 midges,
yep,
I think the 6-weight's probby overkill.
The 9-foot 4-weight in that instance would be a great rod to use.
Yeah.
It's one of the few times that I'll say, yeah, bust out the 4-weight for your nymphing, right?
And I do think having those different rods for different situations kind of makes it fun for fly fishing.
It does. Definitely not trying to tell folks not to get them. I'm just saying your 5-weight covers you until you know that you need to move out to something else. A 5-weight covers you for a lot of fishing situations.
And this is coming. So what's really funny is you have Spencer who has 41 fly rods. So he's on one side of the spectrum. This is coming from a guy who I used a 9-foot 5-weight for the first 18 years of my fly fishing career.
But you now own 4 fly rods.
I do. Well, it helps that we've been playing around with some prototypes here at VFC. But I now have a 4-weight that is specialized for throwing dry flies specifically. It is not an 8.5-foot 4-weight. So that helps when there's a kind of a technical hatch going on and I got to be really accurate. And then I have my 9-foot 5-weight, which I use the majority of the time still. And then I have my 9-foot 6-weight that I use when it's windy, when I'm chucking smaller streamers, or when I'm chucking those really heavy nymph rigs.
Yeah.
But like Spencer said, we don't like to have multiple rods when we're out there on the water waiting. It's just a pain in the butt.
It really is.
If let's say I'm on a bigger tailwater and I know it might have the potential for getting windy and I'm probably going to be chucking heavier nymph rigs, maybe the streamer opportunity presents itself, I might err on the side of the 6-weight that day versus the 5-weight. But if I know it's not going to be windy and there's a potential for like dry dropper stuff, I'll probably go 5-weight. Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful.
The last part of the question was about 7-weights. They are the sneaky good rod. Streamers on tailwater, definitely where they excel. Also in lakes. Don't overlook lake fishing with them.
Yeah, that's what we were chucking in the boat with. That's what Ryan had. He had a 7-weight. That's what we were catching all those fish on.
And the right 7-weight can be a great big nymphing stick, and it can also be a great hopper dropper stick too. I got some 7-weights that are a little slower, a little softer, and I love using them for those
Interesting.
big hopper dropper rigs on the really big rivers here in the West. But yeah, 7-weight's definitely underrated in my opinion. I have 3 of them and really enjoy fishing them when I get the opportunity to. So thanks for the question, man. Appreciate it. Our next one's from Brad. He says, "Hey Spencer, thanks for asking. I love you and the pod." Thanks, Brad. Way to make it weird. Last February, I began my fly fishing journey. The biggest frustration/challenge by far was tying knots to attach flies to my tippet. I had a ridiculous amount of knot failures while fishing, or I wouldn't even get that far because I'd pull too hard while tightening the knots. I tried the clinch knot and the improved clinch knot, but still had the same problems. This winter I found and have been practicing the Davy knot. Is this a good substitution? Any advice on the clinch or knots in general? Clinch is all I've ever used, so that's just what I default to. The Davy, there's nothing wrong with it. If you like it, you can tie it better, use it. It's really that simple.
Have you ever tried the Davy?
Once or twice.
Okay. So I had another person in school the other day ask me about the Davy knot. And I guess one of the pros of the Davy is it's less bulky than a clinch knot.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And I don't know. I'm curious to maybe try it out. But again, what you're saying, like we've used the clinch knot all of our lives and we've never had a reason to switch from it.
No. So my 2 cents would be practice your knots some more when you're not on the water. And then the other part too, we were actually, was it last summer we were fishing? Me and Alex, a couple other guys, one of the other guys was asking me why his knot kept breaking while he was tightening it down. And I said, well, show me what you're doing. And he'd hold the fly and he would yank on the tippet really hard to make sure that the knot was good. And then it would break. I'm like, well, yeah, you're breaking the tippet when you're yanking on that. So there is a
breaking strength.
Yeah. There's the breaking strength. And I don't really yank on my knots too hard. I just pull them tight and that's it. I've never understood why people like to yank on them hard. That's going to weaken your tippet. I just seed it, trim it, and call it a day.
And I think one thing that can also help is you like lick it.
Yep.
Give it some lubrication, right? Because if it's dry and you tighten one of those knots, it can actually heat up really fast
and damage the tippet.
And that can cause some issues.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right, next question. You want to read this one?
Yeah, let me
from Paul.
Get it pulled up here.
I got it here.
I got it.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Please talk about streamers. My question is, what size of streamer does one use and how is the size chosen? The trout in my local river can get as big as 30 inches plus.
Call BS. No such thing as a 30-inch trout. If there was, I'd have caught it by now.
I know that bigger flies don't equate to bigger fish. Is there some magical formula to use?
There is a magical formula. What you're going to want to do, you want to go out to the river and you're going to open your fly box. You're going to face it towards the river at a 45-degree angle upstream. Then you're going to arrange some rocks in a heart around the fly box. After that, you're going to get some of the local grasses. You're going to weave them together into a braid. And then you are going to light this braid on fire and you're going to lay it perpendicular to the largest rock in that little heart arrangement that I mentioned, ending so that the local grasses burn out on your fly box, and the last ember that lands in your fly box from the burning local grasses is the streamer to use. Next question.
How'd you do that?
Just
personal experience?
No, I started out and I said, where is this journey going to take me? And that's where it took me. It took me there.
All right. I love that. I'm going to have to try that next time we go out.
Honestly, the biggest, the streamer size, just what size, it's more about rod specific than it is anything else. We were fishing big, articulated, so they had 2 hooks. They were probably 5-6 inches long. The streamers we were using with Ryan.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like 4 or 5.
Probably. And Ryan and I used to fish like 13-inch streamers out of the boat sometimes, just for kicks, because you can. Not necessarily because you should, but you can. So Really, it's just the bigger fly you use, generally the bigger fish you're going to catch, but the fewer fish you're going to catch because of how many fish in there are both willing to eat a 10-inch streamer and hungry at the moment to do it.
And able.
Yes.
Like those little small trout, they can't get that in their mouth.
So you can chuck that big one and you might not catch anything all day versus you throw the 3-inch one, you're going to catch a bunch because a lot more fish can eat that.
What was Ryan saying when we were out with him? He was saying that fish can eat a fish half of their length.
About half of their length.
About half their length. So if you got a 30-inch trout, you can just fish a 15-inch streamer.
Minimum. I'd even go 20. Make it irresistible.
I think it also depends on the size of the water you're fishing.
Yep.
Like you don't want to chuck a 6-7-inch streamer in a tiny small creek.
No.
You're just going to spook every fish that's in there.
And you're going to hang up on the bottom. It's going to be a pain in the butt.
So when you're fishing those smaller ones, I don't know, size 10, 8, 6.
Yeah.
4, maybe 4.
Yeah. That'd be about right. And single hook.
Yeah. Single hook. And then when you get into these larger tailwaters, I mean, the river you're fishing, if there's 30-inch fish, it's probably a pretty big river. You can chuck those larger streamers, no problem.
Exactly. Awesome. Ty has our next question.
I got it.
Okay.
Simple question, but is it okay to jump tippet sizes when building out rigs? For example, fishing a 4X leader, then going to 6X fluoro, or should I not be lazy and tie a 5X section? Thanks as always. Ty? I think if you want the best performance out of your leader, the most likelihood of your flies turning over correctly, yes, you should not be lazy. Can you skip it if you want to? Yeah, I've done it before. It works, especially when you're nymphing. I haven't seen as big of an issue, but if you're chucking little small dry flies and you go from 4X to 6X all of a sudden, you're not going to have enough momentum once it hits that 6X to turn the fly over to get your cast to look correct.
Mm-hmm. It really boils down to, are you here to fish or are you here to make a fool of yourself? Okay. Because if you're just here to screw around, then it's just tie 3X to 7X and call it a day, right? No. Kidding aside, the other thing to look out for too is if you make that jump from, let's say, 4 to 6, the knots usually don't seat very well and they'll break super easy because the line is just too thick and these knots aren't designed to work with lines that are hugely different in diameter. The blood knot, the surgeon's knot don't work very well if you're trying to go from like 3X to 5X.
You'll go to tighten it and it'll just like slide apart, or the heavier tippet will just snap the smaller tippet.
Yeah. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Another question along these lines from Uzi or Uzi. I always forget how to pronounce his name, and he's told me before, so I apologize. But he writes in and says, most recently when I go out, I've noticed I lose flies without getting tangled or anything, and when I come to check my line, there's just no fly there. Will this be considered a knot failure, or is there something else I should be considering? Well, have you considered that? I was going to say something witty, but it also sounded too mean. So let's just self-censoring here at Untangled.
This has totally happened. I feel your pain on this, and it's really frustrating when you're buying flies. $2, $3, $4 flies, and you go to just like re-rig or something, and you've been fishing a rig without a fly for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, and you just didn't notice. A lot of times, it could be a knot failure, 100%. If you're fishing small flies too, and you're moving your fly rod too quickly during the casting process, you're creating a tailing loop. You're hearing that cracking, that whip noise. That could be the leader actually snapping, and then you're losing your flies that way too.
Indiana Jones casting going on.
So my first inclination is that yes, you probably the knot probably wasn't seated correctly. You could probably improve your knot tying skills. So that's my first. That's where I go to first. The other part would be the cast. So
nice,
good question. All right,
Sai. I'm really struggling with nymphing. yes, it's cold. Yes, the water's cold. But despite trying everything I can think of, what's the deal? I've watched other anglers catch 4 or 5 fish, and I just get skunked. Any ideas? Keep up the good work and live real life.
I'm so glad that you read this one. There's nobody better to ask about why your nymphing isn't working than Alex freaking Stoltz. That is your middle name, right? Freaking? It's on the birth certificate.
Yeah. So, Sai, I actually did read some of the comments from other people and some of your responses to this question in school. And I was a little confused because you were talking about how you're getting to the right depth, which would have been my first thing. I would have said, okay, the number one key to nymphing is getting your flies into the strike zone. And that is where the fish are feeding at that given point in time. Sometimes, and most of the time, the fish are in that lower third of the water column. They are close to the bottom. They're watching for nymphs zooming by their face. And if you don't get your nymph into that section of the river, they're not going to go up 2 or 3 feet, grab a nymph, and then go back down. They're going to just open their mouth, grab that nymph really quick, and then stay in that lower third. Sometimes when bugs start moving, like in the spring, they'll move into the maybe like top third of the water column, maybe a little higher off the bottom. But most of the time they're either in the bottom third or the top third, and they're going to come
really
up.
Spend time in that middle portion.
No, then it's just like it's not the Goldilocks zone. It's like lower to the bottom. That's where the water is moving slowest. So they're able to conserve energy, and then there's food still coming to them. But then when a hatch starts coming off, more bugs are going to be in that top third of the water column.
All the food's concentrated.
So they're
up there.
willing to move up there and grab those. But then what's funny is they'll actually go back down to the bottom.
Yeah.
So I would say number one key to nymphing, it's greater than fly pattern.
Oh, yeah.
You have to get your flies into the strike zone. So I would say, are you adjusting your indicator? So you move it further away from your nymphs, which allows them to sink further. Another option is use bigger, heavier nymphs. Those sink faster. You could use slimmer profiled nymphs, maybe some that are coated in UV resin. They'll cut through the water faster.
And they'll stay in the strike zone longer.
They'll stay in the strike zone longer.
You might be getting deep enough. You just might not be deep enough for long enough. Could be an issue.
Split shot is another would say that's last resort. And so even before split shot, indicator, heavier flies, you can cast further ahead of where you think the strike zone is. So let's say I'm looking at the river right here, and I think the strike zone is right here, center, right in front of me. I can cast 10 or 15 feet above that, which gives my nymphs a longer amount of time to sink and get into the strike zone. And then I know that my nymphs are in the strike zone right where I think that fish is.
Yep.
And then last resort, split shot.
Yep.
Sometimes the difference between an okay day and lights out day is adding a tiny little split shot.
Yep.
And so after all of that, if you're still not catching fish, that's when I'll switch fly patterns.
And I can't remember, is Sai newer to fly fishing? Has he been doing it for a while?
Yeah, he's pretty experienced.
Okay, I couldn't remember. Because one thing I do see with a lot of folks who are new to nymphing is they're not picking up on the subtle bites either. That indicator, if it does anything that is not moving along with the current, set the hook. If it hesitates, if it wiggles, if it bounces, anything, set the hook. Because a lot of those bites are much more subtle than you would realize. So I couldn't remember, like I said, if Sai was new to fly fishing or not. Might be new to nymphing, though. You might just not be setting on enough of them either. So that could be another potential problem.
Yeah.
So I would focus on depth. I would focus on setting on anything that might be a fish. And then the last thing, too, is go talk to those other anglers that are catching fish. Take a look at their rigs, figure out what's going on. Because sometimes the fish are very picky about how they want things drifting, especially in the winter. So you might need to rig your flies up so that they are drifting on tags versus in tandem, because it's just not drifting exactly how the fish want them. Sometimes you do have to make that change. very, very rarely they'll be keyed in on one particular fly in the winter. Usually that's not the case with nymphing in the winter.
Sometimes it does happen though.
So
Like,
it does,
yeah.
but usually it's because your fly is not in the right spot. It's not because you're using the wrong one.
Totally.
But go check out what those other anglers are doing too, because you'll learn a lot from looking at how they put their rigs together. Just watch them fish for a minute. Most anglers are pretty good about that and are more than happy to help. If they're not, you just tell them that they ain't good enough for VFC, and then just, like slice their waders when they're not looking. Give them a little, give them a reason to get off the water. So
VFC does not endorse this message.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up the Q&A portion. Anything else you want to tell Si? Are we good?
No, I think just the smallest little tweaks can make such a big difference sometimes.
It does.
So I do think talking to those anglers would be helpful.
Yep.
Because the difference between 4 and 5 fish and none, there's something going on.
Yeah.
There. So yeah, I'd give them a little chat.
Yeah. Don't slice their waders though. We don't approve of that. All right. Well, we are going to end the show.
My favorite part of every Untangled episode.
Yep. The live real life moment where we get to hear and see some of the adventures that y'all are having. We love to see what y'all are up to. That's why VFC exists, is to help y'all live real life. So if you've got a live real life moment you would like to share, there's a link to send those in down in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. And I'm reading it, or do you want to?
You got it.
Okay. This week's A Live Real Life moment is from Jacob, who wrote in and said, "Hello, VFC crew. I would like to offer my sincere appreciation for everything you guys do. I'm a longtime listener of the podcast and have listened to every single episode. It's great entertainment on my Thursday mornings making bread for my bakery. Last summer, I became addicted to northern pike fishing. I know most of your videos are geared towards trout, but as you often mention, all the lessons you teach can be translated to different species. Put your fly in front of fish and make it look as real as possible. I spend most of my time using spinning gear, but after becoming hooked on your podcast, I made a goal last fall to catch a pike on the fly. I tied up as many meaty streamers as possible and have spent the fall and early spring getting skunked time and time again. At times I was tempted to just give up and go back to throwing giant rapalas on spinning gear. Thankfully, I persisted, and after countless skunky days, I went out to my local pike lake in northwest Montana. The weather was beautiful for once, and after netting a few pike on spin gear, I decided to switch to the fly. I broke out my 9-weight rod with a sink tip, tied on a size 1 olive dudgeon, and on my first cast, landed this small but spunky northern pike. I spent the next hour crushing it and went home very satisfied. Without your guidance and encouragement, I would have never stayed persistent enough to attain this goal. The first thing I thought of doing after hooking that fish was to write and tell you about it. Countless lessons have been learned from your show, and the most important to me is to stay persistent and always try to learn. If we ever meet in person, the wings are on me." Well, Jacob, that's awesome, man. And if we ever meet in person, I got to pick your brain about baking bread, because I'm not in my sourdough era. I'm not, but I do bake quite a bit of bread. Okay, and I'm always looking for pointers on how to improve my bread. So we can do a little quid pro quo here. I'll give you some more fly fishing info. You give me some bread secrets. No, that's a wonderful story, man. Thanks. Appreciate the kind words, of course, but way more stoked to hear that you just went out, you did it. There's no substitute for that. You just go out and you do it. You can sit here and listen and dream it up and diagram things and think about rigs, but you got to just go out and do it at some point. And I love when we hear folks who just go and do it and learn and figure it out, because that is the big difference maker in this sport. You can't learn it all in a book. You got to just go do it. And I love the fact that you did that and shared it with us.
Yeah, this was awesome.
I love it.
I seriously love these moments every week, because it just brings fly fishing to life. And people are just out there making memories, and they share it with us. And it's like when I'm listening to this story, it's like I'm there.
Yep.
And it just brings my heart joy. So thanks so much, Jacob, for sending that on in.
And with that, folks, we're going to wrap the show up this week. Thank you all so much for being here, listening to the entire thing. Helps us out more than you know. And if you want to help us out even more, please tell everybody you know about Untangled and about VFC. Let them know the good word. Remember what your life was like before you heard the show? It was dark. It was dull. Colors didn't exist. Your food didn't taste right.
You didn't even know about chicken wings.
No, you didn't. Then you turn on Untangled and boom, it's like that scene in The Giver when the color happens. You realize it and it blows your mind. Hey, share that with other people, as many as you can. And if you could too, make sure you rate and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it. That helps us out as well. But until next week, folks, get out on the water, enjoy yourselves, catch some fish, and live real life.